So we'll go ahead and get started. So again, this session is What's New in Social Justice Studies. And my name is Anastasia Panagakos. I am the Chair of Social Justice Studies, and along with my colleagues Danielle Mollel and José Alfaro, we will be facilitating this discussion and letting folks know what's been going on with our new program here on campus. And so before we do that, I'm just trying to get that going there. Okay, so before we do that, just to give an agenda as to what we'll do today. So we'll do a little welcome. Perhaps everyone can also just introduce themselves very quickly, just so that we know who's in the session. And we'll talk a little bit about the classes that we teach here at CRC. We'll talk about what social justice studies is and kind of what role it plays, and then ideas about moving forward with our program. And I think this is a great opportunity to hear from folks about what they might be interested in, since it is a very collaborative and also interdisciplinary and intersectional kind of program. So before we get to that, I just want to do our land acknowledgement. And this is to remind ourselves that we pause to acknowledge that the Cosumnes River College sits on the land of the Miwok and Nisenan people. We remember their continued connection to this region and give thanks to them. And we offer our respect to their elders and to all Miwok and Nisenan people of the past and present. And so again, just taking a pause to remember where our college is located, and perhaps also thinking today a little bit about the Cosumnes River itself, which is mighty with all the recent rains that we've had. So again, just reminding us of where we are in the world. And again, welcome to everyone. And I also realize we're recording this, but they will crop out everyone's introductions for the website. I just realized, I'm like, oh, that's like, it's kind of personal, but I'm really glad that everyone's here. And thank you so much for joining us today. And so I'll go ahead and give a little bit of an introduction about social justice studies and also our department before I turn it over to Danielle and Jose to talk about their specific classes. Feel free to put anything in the chat. If I could ask for Jose and Danielle to maybe monitor the chat a little bit in case I miss something or don't see it because I'm too busy staring at the screen to see all of it. So if you could just keep an eye on that, and you know, everyone raise your hand if you want to jump in. Would love to have a discussion about this. So, and you can all see my PowerPoint, I believe. So, okay, so I want to talk just a little bit about social justice studies itself. And, oops, it went to, there we go. Sorry, just beginning of the semester. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about social justice studies and just a couple things to think about. So we know that this is a growing interdisciplinary field. This is something that we've looked into over the last few years as we've been developing our program. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that students today really want to be engaged with the world. We see an uptick in students becoming activists. They've become very interested in the world around them, whether it has to do with climate change and climate justice, to racial justice and Black Lives Matter, to LGBTQ rights. We know that students really want to look at the world in a way where they can make it a better place and to understand the various injustices that exist in their world and what that they can do about it. So we know that students today are looking for these kinds of classes. And just a couple of examples, and there are many more out there, but these are just two that I often cite. So for example, just where we see them in institutions of higher learning, at Arizona State University, they have a School of Social Transformation. And not only does the school have a robust undergraduate and graduate program, the students at ASU also, many of them, thousands of them, last year it was 13,000 students took classes in social justice and human rights studies. So just to kind of give us a quantitative idea of what numbers might look like. Also, if we look a little closer to home, UC Santa Cruz's John R. Lewis College has created an integrated living and learning environment through engaging academic and extracurricular programs focusing on the theme of social justice and community. And so in this case, we have actually a whole college that has embraced the social justice studies perspective and lens, and gives students at UC Santa Cruz a way of really incorporating that into their entire college experience, and to help them become something that we're interested in, of course, lifetime activists, help them become folks who carry their education with them, think about community service, think about ways to transform the world. So we know that students are interested in these topics. We know that there are numbers out there to support the inclusion of social justice studies, and we are really happy to have that on our campus. A couple things. This is from the Diverse Issues in Higher Ed article that came out in 2020. Again, just a few numbers. So increased participation in social justice efforts has shifted student interest in career pathways. So we know that there really is an impact. 48% report that their involvement in social justice efforts has impacted their career choices. And then 51% report that their involvement has impacted their coursework choices. So again, integrating this idea into the curriculum as part of a broader process and purpose. So whether a student is going into biology or kinesiology or a social science like sociology, there's really it is impactful. Social justice is impactful for everyone. Okay. Couple things here at CRC. So for those of you who don't know our program, we started off, I guess it was now maybe about 5 or 6 years ago. I'm a little fuzzy with the pre-pandemic timeline, but we started off several years ago with a collaborative project between many disciplines here on our campus. There was about 24 faculty members that started to come together to talk about creating a social justice studies program. And we got that going, and then as everyone knows, curriculum takes a long time to get going. And so over the years, we've been able to add and build upon our program in this way. So we have 2 transfer degrees. We have a race and ethnicity path, and we also have a women, gender, and LGBTQ studies path. And so those 2 came into effect a couple years ago. And we also have the following courses. So we have Social Justice Studies 300, Intro to SJS, which was first taught in fall of 2021 by Danielle, and also SJS 310, Intro to LGBTQ Studies, which was first taught in spring of 2022 by Jose. In addition, we recently just started with the development of a new class, and this would be called SJS 320. And SJS 320 would be Introduction to Disability Studies. And not only would this be brand new to our college, this actually would be brand new to our district. And there are, as far as I know, Amanda Paskey, you're kind of my go-to person for all things curriculum, but I'm pretty sure it's one of the very few Intro to Disability Studies courses that would be taught in a California community college. Is that right?
Correct.
So we are feeling a little bit like trailblazers on this course, and Amanda Paskey, along with everyone on our SJS steering committee, including Jose, Danielle, Tanika, Jacob, and Diana, have all contributed to helping put this together, along with counselors Scott Hamilton and Teresa O'Brien. So that has also been a collaborative effort. And I feel like I always learn something new every time we start a new project, which is that we're able to bring in more and more folks who bring their unique perspective and also help us create this program. So where we are with that, and I can speak to that if Jose and Danielle are okay with that. I can speak to the disability studies class first, and then open it up for you both to talk about your classes. Okay, so for that class, we've already done a course outline. And so I can, if folks are interested, I can actually put the link for the course outline in the chat. And that way folks can have a look at it and see what we're working on, if anyone's interested, because it's not in Socrates yet. We had to ask for a designator within Socrates to create a subgroup within SJS for disability studies. And so I can go ahead and pop that in the chat in a moment when I stop talking and can find the file. And so the nice thing about this class is that not only is it something that's been a long time coming, I think we all would agree that having an intro to disability studies greatly enhances our ability to offer impactful and relevant curriculum for our students. but also, again, it allows us to continue to sort of collaborate among ourselves as colleagues. And one thing that's been really interesting, I think, when also thinking about that class specifically, is that in our discussions, we talked about how this is a class that it's not just for, say, for example, folks who have an interest in going into disability studies as a discipline, or they're thinking about being a counselor, or they're going into a field that's related like healthcare. But really, it is a class that we all could stand to use in one way or another, especially as we think about the way that we serve our students who are disabled, and how so many of us have a very limited understanding of what disability means. And so we saw it also as a way to greatly increase cultural competency among ourselves, among our students, and also as a class that would be great for workforce development, that if someone was coming to CRC to take classes because they're interested, they're beefing up their resume to get a new job, this is a great thing that they would be able to add to say that they have experience and that they understand some of the issues that will make them a better employee or a better boss or a better colleague. And so that's kind of where we are timeline-wise with that class. And so it will take, again, as Amanda Paskey could tell us, I think we're probably maybe 2 years out from actually being able to offer it. Amanda, is that am I about right on the time frame on that one?
That's a fair estimate.
Okay. And it's a fair estimate. As we all know, that the wheels of curriculum move slowly. So we'll be continuing on that process. I will drop in the chat the link to the Google Doc so folks can look at the course outline of record if you're interested, since it's not in Socrates yet. But again, I definitely invite everyone who has an interest to have a look at it and provide us with suggestions for how we can proceed moving forward with that class. So with that, let's see. Hold on a second. Too many screens open. Okay. So before I turn it over to Danielle and Jose, one other thing that I wanted to talk about with teaching social justice studies on our campus is that if you look at our course outlines for SJS 300 and 310, you'll note that we have kind of an extensive list of disciplines that are approved to teach SJS. So in order for someone to teach the class, they have to have either the equivalency or have degrees in the following. And I will note that they're not exactly the same for 300 and 310, they're slightly different. But when we were putting these courses together, we tried to be very broad because, again, given the interdisciplinary nature, we wanted to be sure that we were capturing as many folks as possible who might be interested in teaching these classes. Right now, the faculty teach it on a 2-year rotation. So we're in the 2nd year of this cycle. And so Danielle is teaching SJS 300 again for the 2nd time, or did, sorry, we're in spring. She did in fall, and Jose is teaching 310 again for the 2nd time in spring. And so part of our discussion too, moving forward, is recruiting faculty to teach in the next cycle. And something that our committee talked about too was that if we're unable to find anyone to teach the classes next year, that Danielle and Jose were interested in continuing for 1 more year while we sort out the next hiring or the next folks who would teach it. So that's kind of where we are. And unless there's any, let me make sure I can see everyone, unless there's any questions for me specifically, I can turn it over to Danielle and Jose. Looks like we're good. Cool.
Right.
Okay, Danielle, can I turn it, since you're 300 and Jose's 310, can I turn it over to you first?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for all of that, all that background. It was actually helpful for even me to get a refresher on some of these things. And I have to say, yeah, it's been an absolute privilege to be able to teach 300 over the past couple of years. And if there's no takers for 2023, that will be fine with me. I will teach it again, and very happily, because it's been a pleasure. But I definitely hope that other people get to experience this as well. So just a little bit more about my background, how I got into teaching this class. I didn't really mention that in my intro, but of course I'm in the English department, but my background has involved doing research around Black feminism and the Black radical tradition and the Black freedom struggle. So I kind of have come from that perspective. I also have a background as an activist working for a feminist activist organization in East Africa. And currently I have a nonprofit that's working to empower Indigenous people in East Africa. So so those are kind of my angles into the social justice topic. And some of that definitely comes up in my approach and in the content that I offer in my version of SJS 300. What I want to do just briefly is give a picture of how I approach the course, the things that I highlight for my students more broadly, what I want them to really take away, and kind of how I arrange things thematically, as well as just mentioning some of the content as well. So to give you an idea of what I teach and what is possible. Of course, we begin with just the term social justice, which gets thrown around so much in the media. Students have heard it, students are coming from so many different places into this class. Some really have worked with the term social justice before. Some don't even have a really clear idea of what that term would mean. They come from so many different disciplines. Some come from other campuses. So we definitely start there because it's a term that's misunderstood. So we really try to get, for me, I try to lay down that term as a term that in its most basic form refers to the idea that all humans are equal and deserve the same rights and opportunities. That's the most basic definition. But then going further, we understand it as a term that's interested in the concept of universal human rights and universal access to basic needs, food, clean water, shelter, education, and healthcare. We understand it as a term interested in equal access to the democratic process, and also interested in an equitable and just society. We understand it as a term that implies that discrimination, injustice, and inequity are problems that must be addressed through various means, from changing laws, reforming institutions, educating populations, restoring rights, and other methods. We also understand that gender equality, racial equality, LGBTQ plus rights, Indigenous rights, disability rights, and rights of other marginalized and oppressed identity groups are of central importance to the concept and practice of social justice. We understand that class oppression is part of the concern, and that environmental justice is also part of the concern, even though social justice, by some definitions, focuses more on human rights. We understand that the environment is a part of the project, and it intersects with different aspects of social justice, especially when we're thinking about Indigenous rights. It's kind of it's hard to divorce the two. And then we understand that social justice is integrally linked to movements. So in other words, it's not just a concept, but also a prescription for action. It can't just exist as an idea alone. It has to be put into action. And this action can take the form of nonviolent protest, legislative reform. It could be we look at histories that involve resurrection and revolt that include the use of force. So we look at everything, and we consider it all. And of course, we also see that action can take the form of creative expression, literature, the visual arts, music, film, all of this that brings awareness to social justice issues and encourages individual change makers and collective movements to transform society. We understand education as a form of social justice. Teachers in K through 12, college professors like ourselves, we guide our students to understand and think critically about issues related to social justice, so that we are creating change, and then those who are teaching are creating change. And then by extension, social justice studies is a study of all of the above. It includes all of the above, and it's something that happens, for us at the college level, and it's utilizing an interdisciplinary approach, which the students, some of them are new to the idea of interdisciplinary study. But of course, all the fields that were mentioned on Anastasia's PowerPoint, come into play, if not more, ethnic studies, cultural studies, feminism, critical race theory, queer studies, economics, history, sociology, all of that. We're gonna use whatever we can, and whatever's in our tool belt. And I guess what I aim for my students to gain, or what I aim for them to actually do overall, is to survey the field of social justice studies in the broadest way possible by focusing on several disparate issues, disparate themes and theories that will empower them to speak and think in an informed manner about social justice, as well as to confront the injustice that they observe in their own lives. And so the final project for the class is for them to propose a problem and solution that they aim to take on, with the tools that they have gained during the course. So, they early in the semester, they identify a social justice problem that they're passionate about. Halfway through the semester, they re-identify it. Sometimes it changes for them. Sometimes it's the same one. And then throughout the semester, they start honing honing an explanation of what the problem is, and then they hone the solution, how to solve it. And so it's really interesting to see. And my hope is that, and I think for many of them, they will go on and try to solve it in the ways that they've thought about and that they propose. And of course, some of them may already be activists involved in things. So just lastly, I just wanted to mention some kind of the units that I have done this past fall, because I have, for me, the most fun part is just the content, of course. Well, I mean, I don't know if it's the most fun part, but I love it. So we actually start the course with a just to warm up, I have everybody view Michael Moore's documentary, Where to Invade Next. I love it because it just brings a lot of terms to the table that are relevant to thinking about social justice, as well as a lot of issues. If you haven't seen that documentary, I highly recommend it. I'm not going to summarize it, but it's a great one. I recommend to everybody. And by the way, terms are a major tool for me as a way to mobilize understandings and conversations around social justice. So I really have people draw out terms from what they're reading or viewing, and then I have them define the terms, and we do word clouds and discussions around the terms. So it's really a lot of terms are kind of at the center of the work we do. We spent a couple of weeks with Angela Davis's amazing book, Freedom is a Constant Struggle, Ferguson, Palestine, and the Foundations of a Movement, because it also brings to the fore not really essential terms that we use throughout the course, and movement, the idea of movements, and giving a lot of life to the idea of various social justice movements out there, from Black Lives Matter to Palestinian liberation to Black feminism and so forth. We look at critical race theory, which of course has been in the news, and been maligned, and the term has been, taken out of context in so many ways. So we bring it back into context. We understand the history by looking at some of the original authors of the idea and really getting to understand that, and then looking at some of the contemporary controversies and what people have said about it in the news. And then the students have a chance to really kind of use critical thinking skills to parse through the truth, the reality versus the fiction. We look at intersectionality, that important term that comes from Black feminism, and we read Audre Lorde, Kimberly Crenshaw, and the Combahee River Collective Statement. We look at colonialism, Indigenous rights, and the environment through the angle of some of the work that I've been doing on the side in East Africa around Maasai land rights in Tanzania and Kenya. And then we look at the relationship between social justice and self-care. which is a really key component, especially for those who are going to take on activism. Self-care is essential for them to preserve themselves in the work that they're doing. And we look at that through Angela Davis again, Audre Lorde, and Bell Hooks. This year, I added a couple of new things. During election week, we looked at the topic of voter suppression, and we also looked at some of the ways in which what's happening with the Supreme Court is affecting specific civil liberties like gay marriage and reproductive rights, which are very, urgent for so many people. And then a couple other things we did, last two things, I'm not going on too long, but the term woke is in our culture. It's actually been part of like Black culture for a long time. It's really kind of comes from hip hop in a lot of ways, maybe even predates hip hop. So I had everybody, think about the term woke, and we read about the history of woke through this like series in OK Player, and we understood the Black cultural roots of the term woke. We looked at the idea of woke washing and woke capitalism, and just how that hashtag stay woke has kind of existed or has kind of been circulating in our culture recently, because the idea of woke is directly related to the idea of social justice, right? It's kind of like a colloquial way of saying social justice in a lot of ways. And then finally, around Thanksgiving, we were looking at I had people think about Indigenous perspectives on Thanksgiving, which dovetailed with things we learned earlier in the semester. And then just to keep things a little light and comfortable, I had them learn about the Danish term. Is it Danish, right? No, right. No, I'm not. Yeah, hygge. Am I pronouncing that right? Am I wrong? It's Denmark, right? Yes. Okay, I had to think about that. But that, if you don't know about that, it's like it's actually refers to just like a lifestyle, like a Scandinavian kind of, or a Danish way of life, where you just, especially in the cold weather, kind of take care of yourself and indulge in things that make you feel good, like a brownie or like a hot cup of hot cocoa or something like that. But the content that I gave them also, points to how some of those values are also like extend to how the state of Denmark incorporates social democratic programs like free healthcare, free education, etc. How that is all part of the same ethos, which is kind of an interesting way of thinking about it. So that is what I do. I hope I didn't go on for too long. I can pass it over to Jose, but if anybody has any questions about that or comments, I'm happy to hear that now or reply in the chat too.
Okay. Danielle, I am going to go just because I do have to go to a doctor's appointment soon.
Sorry about that.
So if everyone can please hold their questions till the end, that would do me a huge favor. Thank you, Danielle, for that. Danielle and I have sort of workshopped before together on brainstorm these classes so that we create a little bridge for students who usually do go straight from 300 right into 310 the next semester. And I've only taught, and I think this is the case for Danielle as well, I've only taught the class online, asynchronous, which is really interesting because the class has been pretty full. So I have 35 students this semester. That was about the same case before. I had been teaching an LGBTQ, I was supposed to teach an LGBTQ literature class on ground this semester, and it was under-enrolled. So there might be some interesting things to say about that in the future of like how we schedule for certain courses. But it's been very successful online, asynchronous. So I've really enjoyed teaching it. The students are wonderful and great and really ready to have difficult conversations. In my course, I've sort of played with discussions on Discord and the discussions within Canvas, and students seem to really like the informality of Discord and that it actually sounds like a discussion, especially with the topics that we cover. So I've really enjoyed that. My background is in 19th century queer studies to the present. So I take a sort of historical approach and theoretical approach. And the way that I break up my course is we start sort of where 300 leaves off. So I give an introduction to what is queer studies. So we go over LGBTQ identities, but I also introduce them to queer theories that talk about how the word queer is also a word that describes an alternative, right? Something, a new kind of world making that can happen. So we talk about it both in terms of identity, but also in terms of revolutionary world building. And from there, we talk about intersectionality as well. We touch on it again and really try to get to works like from Audre Lorde and Bell Hooks from Margin to Center. And I also build in a unit like Danielle, because we talked a lot about mental health last year and the importance of that with activist work. So I have a 1-week segment on queer joy, pleasure, and rest. And so they read Pleasure Activism by Adrienne Marie Brown and Audre Lorde's The Uses of the Erotic. So we talk about how activist work is really difficult, it's draining on the mind and the body. So what steps are you taking to take care of yourself so that you can be successful? From there, I have my second unit is on queer history. So a lot of students think of queer history as something that's very modern. So many of them are really interested to learn that there's like an early history. And so we start off with early Black and trans histories, from colonization to like pre-colonial histories to the present. They also read archives of enslaved folks who could have been queer, and they read this really interesting article called No Kisses Like Yours, an erotic friendship between two African American women during the mid-19th century. And students really loved that article when I taught it. And it was my first time teaching it, but many students resonated with it. It's letters between two women. And the whole article kind of thinks about what desire means during that time period before we have titles like LGBTQ to describe sexualities. We talk about queer indigeneity, so two-spirit identities in pre-colonial America. And we talk about revolutions, queer revolutions, both in the context of Indigenous and Black resistance, but also in the context of the 1970s movement, the feminist movements, and things like that. The last unit I have is on queer of color critique and performance. And under that, we talk about AIDS and activism and resistance from queer communities of color. We talk about art and performance as forms of resistance. So I have them think through how resistance can look differently for many folks. You know, for me, I might not be out on the front lines, but the work that I do is in the classroom, and that for me is a form of activism. So I make them think through like what it means for them. What is the role of art? What is the role of people who go out and protest? How do these different avenues talk to one another? And we end, well, actually, this is a good bridge because we just have disability studies as a course. So I end with I have a queer class and ability segment. So we talk about ability, disability studies, and they read Eli Clare, who has cerebral palsy and is a trans man. So we talk about the intersections of that, and we end with the documentary Disclosure from Netflix. So that's kind of the trajectory that I take. It's really fun. I've enjoyed building the class and having these conversations with students, and it really is the people who come really want to learn, and that's been my experience. Yeah, thanks for listening.
Thanks so much, Jose and Danielle. I appreciate the overview of your classes. And again, I mean, sometimes I feel like we've been at this for so long, I forget to pause and just remark on the fact that we have these classes on the books and they're now being taught. Like it came at a time when, like Danielle, when you taught it for the first time, we were in the middle of a pandemic. And so for both you and Jose coming into this, having to make adjustments on how we do things. And it's just been, I think it's just been really great and such a positive experience for our campus and for our students. And so I will, if there's any questions, before, I know Jose, you might need to bounce out in a second. So are there any questions? If anyone wants to raise their hand, ask a question, put it in the chat. Looks like we're good. The one thing I wanted to just to piggyback on what you were both saying was you're both coming from an English perspective as your disciplines, and yet you both have so many interests that fall outside of traditional disciplinary boundaries, which we know, of course, is part of our desire in social justice studies. And I think one thing that's nice as we move forward thinking about the future is being able to bring in colleagues who may teach the class from a different disciplinary standpoint. So for example, I know we've talked about having somebody whose training might be in psychology or someone who's in history or sociology who would come in. And that's, I think, kind of the beauty of it is that the classes are broad enough in topic, but they do allow for some individuality based on the instructor. And
bye, Jose.
Oh, bye, Jose. Thank you so much for being here. We'll be in touch. Thanks so much. And so it's a really nice thing that we're able to do is again bring together that collaborative aspect of it. And with that in mind, actually, we can just want to be mindful of the time. We can move forward, and if questions come up about that, we can discuss more. But Jose did actually mention one of the things that we have that can be a bit challenging, and this is something that's actually come up in all the meetings I've been in today, which is modality and what students are interested in, and how do we get students to enroll in classes. And we didn't really have, well, I mean, yeah, in the beginning, we didn't really have a choice. Our classes needed to be online and online because of the pandemic. But as we've moved forward with being more on ground, we were hesitant actually to put the SJS classes on ground because we worried they wouldn't get enrollment. And the reason why I stress that too is because we actually saw at other campuses in Los Rios that had SJS classes on ground, that their classes were not filling. The ones that were, and some eventually went to online. And so I think for us, we were, being that the program was so new, we wanted to really be sure the classes had decent enrollment moving forward. And so that's why we decided to keep them online asynchronous. It was the safer option. And that may change moving forward, because I think there's also a lot of benefit to having an on-ground cohort, as many of us probably know already, to have students be able to engage face-to-face, even though by all accounts, the SJS classes and other similar classes do a pretty good job when they can create an online environment, of course, that's interactive. I just want to bring these up, and then I want to open it up to any comments or suggestions that you might have for us, or questions. One thing that we want to start working more on now that our classes are established is campus engagement ideas. And so we've been really fortunate at CRC to have this new Center for Inclusion and Belonging, which offers us lots of opportunities to engage with different populations on campus with a wonderful staff that is servicing those populations. And so we're really lucky to have that. Our new ethnic studies program under the direction of Winnie Hung. Winnie has come to our meetings before for SJS, and we've started to talk about ways in which we can collaborate with ethnic studies, since again, there's lots of overlap. Event programming. So looking, for example, at how SJS can also intersect with Black History Month, Women's History Month, Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Week. Like there's all sorts of different possibilities where we can have students engage with SJS plus event programming. And yeah, that's kind of like where my mind was going. So again, this is just sort of brainstorming off the top of my head, but there's of course lots of other ideas that can come into play. And so I'm just going to open it up to anyone who has a comment or a suggestion that they'd like to discuss. And I'm going to stop my screen share. That way we can see each other a little bit better. There we go. Okay. Any comments or questions or suggestions about engagement? Eddie.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to say this, but I do kind of want to jump in. When I'm hearing all of this, I'm thinking, wow, this would be a great collaborative, campus-wide like course teaching where you have people coming in from different parts of the campus and giving, you know, half a class lecture or maybe even a whole class lecture. So I can see like somebody like me who's a trained economist coming in and presenting information that maybe is a different lens to look through. And I'm thinking about, wow, all of that stuff seems so interesting. Like I can think about when we're presenting data in a statistics course, a lot of times the male category shows up first and then the female category. But there's no reason for that. It's just been a historical practice that people do that. And I can see like all kinds of things that individual professors could bring in from their disciplines that would add so much to a course like that. Logistically impossible, right? How do you allocate FTE? How much time does it take to do? But man, I could see how rich this would be and how rewarding for the campus it would be.
Thank you for that. Yeah, there we did in some of our discussions, we've talked about that, like doing like co-teaching and having at least like 2 faculty members co-teach a class from different disciplines as one way of making it sort of manageable and bite-sized, since we can't. It wouldn't be awesome if we could have like, we have 15 weeks and every week is by somebody different, right? To sort of bring that perspective. And actually on that note, question about FTE, and just to let folks who aren't directly involved with the program, so where does the FTE for SJS come from? And actually it is donated from departments. So for example, there is no allocated FTE specifically for SJS. And because we're not using a lot of FTE, we're not asking for like 10 classes to be taught every year. We have had success in having FTE donated by departments. So a 0.2 here, a 0.2 there. We would like that to change. In our dream world, we would be hiring a full-time SJS professor who would then be teaching a course load of 5 classes a semester. And so we did actually, not this year because there was a hiring freeze, but the year before we did put in for an SJS full-time hire. And at this moment, the committee is thinking that we'll continue to put in for a hire and just keep doing it because there's no harm in asking. We may not get it, but every year that we do it, we feel like also gives us like an opportunity to kind of think about our program and what we're looking for. So it actually helps us grow to think about why we want a full-time hire and what that person would be doing. Anything from anyone else want to jump in? Comments, questions?
I just was thinking about the modality of online versus online asynchronous versus in-person, all that. And what I've seen with the students who come to 300, a lot of them, are already, they are already kind of very serious in their academic pursuits, and they kind of already know they're very transfer ready, you know. Some of them are coming from other institutions too outside of CRC, and they are basically taking, you know, the class specifically for the content, or maybe it will help them complete their major in their home campus. And so you know, it's I feel like there's fewer students who are you know, just taking it kind of to, you know, to explore the subject more, and there's more who have a more focused reason for taking it, and a lot of them are, you know, maybe outside of CRC, or even if they're you know, a CRC student, they you know, just in terms of how they are doing their education, it works for them very well to do the asynchronous classes, because they probably are doing something else on the side, not necessarily even a job, but maybe even something academically on the side. So I guess that's why perhaps we're seeing the our classes fill up so well with the asynchronous online modality. But yeah, so it'll be really, it's hard to try to not offer it that way, because it seems to appeal to the students who want to take those classes. But it will be tempting in the near future to try to hold it on, you know, in person, because of what you gain there, and it'll be a different audience probably, I'm imagining. So as long as, but I guess if the program's already established for a few years, we probably have more freedom to experiment in that way. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of observe that, because as you mentioned, you know, there's less, it was a bit risky to try something like that in the first 1 or 2 years. Even the third year, maybe we'll get one more year of traction and then can experiment, and maybe it'll be lower enrollment, and then perhaps, you know, moving forward, there will be more FTE, you know, circulating perhaps, so that I think it'll be great if maybe 1 year in the future there could be like an online version offered one semester of something like 300, which is a core, you know, the basic course, and then like an in-person in the spring, or vice versa. I don't know if we'll have that liberty anytime soon, but that would be, to me, an ideal scenario, to be able to offer both for the two different types of audiences. Okay, I'll also comment, if you don't mind, on Eddie's point. You know, just what you mentioned inspired me to think about, you know, again, how to generate engagement. I wonder, and you know, this is more work for everybody, but instead of having 15 professors teach 15 weeks of the course, wouldn't it be interesting? And I think about Santa Cruz too, the Santa Cruz example, but wouldn't it be interesting if we had a faculty symposium of all faculty who are interested, who feel that they have something to teach about social justice on from all these different disciplinary perspectives and topics, and we just had like a, you know, maybe we get some money and a little food or something like that, and have like a faculty roundtable that students are also welcome to, you know, but the faculty would lead. That is just I'm just kind of jumping off of that idea right there. But another, you know, because there's so many people here in this meeting alone, I'm sure everybody has something that they would want to, like, I can see everybody like leading a mini lecture, and maybe we get a few snacks, and then students are invited, and that would just kind of drum up some engagement and support and interest in the field on campus, perhaps.
Danielle, it's a great idea. It made me think a few years back, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, actually. We did, I sat on a panel where the theme was Star Wars. Rick, do you remember that? I think you were on that panel too, right? And it was kind of the same thing. Like we all did, there was a bunch of us that did mini lectures to talk about like Star Wars from our disciplinary perspectives. For me, it was, I think Brandon Maranaka's was the most, from a math perspective, was how do you calculate the dimensions of the Death Star? But my point is it was done in a mini lectures kind of style, which I think is kind of like the idea, right? And it was, I mean, the topic was cool, but our topic is equally cool. But we could definitely do something like that, I think. And like, again, one of our strengths has always been the amount of faculty who are interested in engaging from one perspective or another. And I love the idea. I hadn't thought about the student aspect of it. I think that would be really cool to have it open, and food always helps too. So I think we should definitely think about an idea like that moving forward. Rick?
I think it's an intriguing idea, and my mind goes to a couple of different models. I think that the Star Wars event you're referring to took place when I was the coordinator of the Center for the Advancement of Staff and Student Learning, which is now the Professional Development Center. So first thought was see if we can get support from PD. The second thought was that it's a way of integrating the FTE and FTES based aspect of the program with that kind of programming, right? So you use your SJS 300 students and other SJS students as a kind of core audience. And then you open up to the campus as a whole, right? So there's somebody who's got FTE to run lead on this. That's whoever's got the FTE for SJS 300. And you pull other people in, right? So and you do it in lieu of classroom instruction. And there are different models that you can employ for that, right? So basically the students who are in the class are having an awesome experience and getting credit for it. And it's open to the rest of the campus in such a way that you have the opportunity to recruit more people into the next iteration of the class. So it's sort of a self-sustaining effort. So that's where my mind went. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, no, that's a great suggestion. And I think that there's definitely different ways. My mind was also, the wheels were turning as you were mentioning that too, because there's so many different ways to approach it. Even thematically speaking, right now, my head is in helping Diana Reed coordinate Women's History Month, and we're always looking for ways to bring in different perspectives on campus. And sometimes there's, the national theme aligns with, so this year the national theme, for example, for Women's History Month is Women Who Tell Our Stories. And so sometimes it's nice when there is a theme. So if we were to do social justice, and do like a mini presentations and a panel, we could piggyback upon a theme, whether it's Black History Month or Women's History Month, whatever the case is, and then it kind of fine tunes it a little bit, and so it's not as amorphous. But that might be something to think about and look at. And yeah, Diana, I
had the same thought. I'm back home. Yes, I had the same thought, and even if we could coordinate with whoever's teaching SJS to get a date in March that they would designate to bringing their class to an on-campus speaker event, and then we will make the event happen. But that's always our big opportunity and challenge, is to find a kind of, to engineer an audience to make sure that if we have a speaker coming, that we get the most bang for our buck. So in fact, some of you may have received an email from me requesting or inviting you to attend for some of our speakers this March. So maybe that's something that could be even worked into if they were willing, for Black History Month in February, Women's History Month in March. Even some of the Earth Week that we do in April maybe would be good for, Danielle was mentioning environmental studies as part of social justice as well. So that would be a pretty cool thing to try to coordinate down the line. Okay, I'll stop.
Any other comments or suggestions for us today?
I'll just add that I think the kind of coordinating with or tagging into existing campus programming like Women's History or Black History Month has the added advantage of bridge building between SJS and other programs.
Okay. And anything from our SJS steering committee that you would like to add? Actually, I'll just say this before I turn it over if anyone else has anything to add, which is, again, I think one of our next moves for us as a steering committee, sooner rather than later actually, is sorting out the teaching assignment for the next 2 academic years. And so as Danielle and Jose mentioned, they will step down if there are others who are interested in teaching. That whole process I have come to find is a little bit nebulous because of the way that our program or the way that things are set up. We don't have to go out and there is no adjunct pool. That's what I wanted to say. So unlike traditionally, like if in Anthro, I need to go out and hire someone to teach a class, there is no pool to go after. And so I had a conversation with the dean about this, and she basically said that it's an internal thing. And so the disciplines that are listed on the course outline of record are the disciplines we can draw from. And so the idea was that we had thrown around, and anyone on the steering committee, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was to sort of put a call out for folks who might be interested. And then as a steering committee, we would discuss and talk about the next steps. And so again, if folks are interested in teaching these classes, and also Danielle and Jose have very generously offered their support and help with onboarding a new instructor. So that's always a good thing too. So if anyone's interested and is in those disciplines that are approved for SJS, please let me know, or Danielle or Jose, and we're more than happy to talk more about it. Or even if you're just interested but not totally sure if you want to teach the class, I think we can have some discussions about that too. So unless there's anything else from any of the steering committee members or just any last comments, I think we're allowed to end a few minutes early. I don't think anyone will mind. Tanika,
I'll just say thanks so much to all of you who are leading the SJS effort.
Thank you, Rick. And thanks to everyone who's on the steering committee. Again, it's been lots of people have had their hands in helping create this collaborative effort. I'm the one who's lucky to be chair, and so I have a few extra responsibilities, like scheduling classes, which is what's coming up next. But yeah, everybody's had a hand, which has been really great.